And I start by welcoming you to the ELTA Academy webinar series. This webinars were created exactly to potentiate knowledge among our members and community, and to give this open source legal tech information on our YouTube channel that you can follow and that you can consult anytime that you have doubts regarding any of the topics that we try to bring the latest or more important, or the topics that get our curiosity. And today we have a special guest, Wilfried de Wever. He will tell you how to pronounce correctly his name, because I did the English version. And he will tell you more about himself. I start also to say that today we had another guest. Wilfried will also explain you why she's not here with us today, and why did we decide to continue this webinar to discuss the startup journey. This idea, the scaling beyond national boundaries, was our first initial title, but we will adjust it a little bit towards this change. And ultimately, we are here to learn also with the journey of Wilfried itself. So, Wilfried, tell us a little bit about you, about your own journey, and why did we need it to change a little bit this, not the why, but a little bit about the guest that unfortunately is not here today with us.
Yeah. Hi, Marisa, and hi, anyone who is watching live or later. Good to see you, and I hope that this knowledge is somehow useful. I'm Wilfried de Wever, that's how you pronounce it, de Wever in Dutch. I'm a Belgian citizen. I've been living in The Hague for the last 10 years, and I have worked a lot on justice innovation, legal tech, governance innovation, different aspects of it. I studied law about 25 years ago, a little bit less than economics. I was very interested in how societies work and the legal infrastructure behind it, but also the financial streams. But I had this creative side. I also made some music, I wrote some poems, and I never quite knew what to do with these things, because it's a fairly conservative world, the world of law and legal infrastructure, especially in those days. I traveled a lot. I started my career as a consultant for European institutions, where there was we were advising on how to exchange criminal records in Europe, how to do border control, setting up platforms like the migration platform, the integration platform, large projects that were a bit strategic, advisory in nature, and creative, building something. But I still, I also saw that many countries were building similar things. So somehow I saw a lot of, and I also saw them spend quite a lot of money on, for example, building websites. And on the other hand, I saw a lot of entrepreneurs building similar things, but for much less resources. It looked much better. It was much more functional. So I was a bit struck by this difference. And at the same time, I still had this creative side. So at a certain moment when I was around 30, I did an extra executive master in innovation and entrepreneurship at the business school in Belgium. And there I found a place where you can be both, let's say, considerate for the legal infrastructure, the economic infrastructure, but also creative, like this place of entrepreneurship and innovation. And I have been working around that for the last 14 years in different capacities. I'll say a bit more about that later. The idea of this talk today was to have a conversation with Margarita as an example of legal tech entrepreneurs that I found in my journey. I have been founder director of a legal tech justice accelerator based in The Hague. We looked globally for interesting entrepreneurs. very interesting teams to do some seed funding in. That was in places like Nigeria, Kenya, but also the Netherlands, New York, but also Ukraine. And Margarita is one of those fantastic entrepreneurs that we found in Ukraine. And she is in Kiev right now, so she is with her team, unable to be here today. I don't think this talk should be about that, but I'm sure that everybody realizes that this is very painful for her. She's doing her very best with her team to help out, to help her team, to help others in Ukraine right now. And so she couldn't be here right now. She hopes that she will be able to share some of her knowledge on scaling internationally or building interesting marketplaces in another session, because it's Legal Notes is a very interesting product. They went from Ukraine to London, have been one of the Techstars selectees, have received a lot of investment. So they are a very interesting success case and a beautiful team. Unfortunately, today they are just busy with other priorities.
So that's exactly also it's public that ELTA supports what's happening now, and it's impossible not to mention the reality that we are living. So it's why we also continue this webinar, right? We hope that the journey inspires others, and we understand the potential for entrepreneurship in this field. As you say, Wilfried, that is quite a difficult place to be an entrepreneur. And maybe now more than ever, we need also to understand how the ecosystem can cooperate, and how can we enhance this capacity in borders and outside in a broader perspective. And with that, Wilfried, you were talking about, of course, your background, and I can see that the mix of legal economy and art, I would say art in a sense of creativity, of course, but the music and all these expressions made you the perfect combination to also understand, not only to work in legal innovation and technology, but also to potentiate this journey of the startups, right? How would you describe this journey itself?
Yeah, there's many aspects, and many people start from a different starting point. I'll start from how it was for me, and then I'll talk a bit about what I've seen, because with this accelerator, that was one of the moments that I saw a lot of entrepreneurs around the world. We looked at more than 1,000 innovations, justice, legal tech innovations, and invested in about 50 of them, guided them through our accelerator. I think there is a lot of entrepreneurs, the cliches maybe is that they're struck by a problem, something that can be much better, can be much improved, or they're struck by an ideal, an amazing potential, and they have a strong imagination. And so that's one thing. There is a need. What the people I've seen on this entrepreneur journey, they are often believers, people who believe that they can make a difference, that the world can become a better place, that there is a bit of idealism and ambition. So some people come at it, and not idealism in the fluffy sense of it, but also with a solid ambition. So, yeah, and there's some realists too, that they don't necessarily change the world, but they know a market or a client very well, and they see an opportunity and they take it. But that's more the incremental changers. They change something, a procedure, or they work within a large institution or law firm, and they see, if we can do this, it can make it a little bit more efficient, and it's more about automation of an existing procedure. But the real entrepreneurs, sometimes they aim a bit higher to change something from the ground up, and to, they're fairly courageous believers that they can make a difference. Yeah, that's all from the start. And then, I mean, there's many things that happen, and there's a wide range of different entrepreneurs, right? Because I've worked with entrepreneurs from within the public sector, within the NGO world, within the private sector. Law is close to a public good. There are parts of it that are more privatized, but there are parts that are close to public infrastructure. So you have a wide range of different entrepreneurs. That's a little bit different compared to some other fields where it is maybe more purely private sector. So that's also a difference. Is that they can come at it from different angles.
Do you think that represents a bigger challenge, and then maybe is playing a role of a difficulty itself, that law and justice are not a typical market on its ends, and that the private structures versus the public represent total different landscapes?
Yeah, it's one of the challenges. So some blueprints that people know from other sectors, they might not work in the legal field. The legal field is more nationalized, so there's more national laws. There are more monopolies. There is public state monopolies, but also some big law firms have a pretty good position in the market. And yeah, so these things are a little bit different than other fields. It's both a problem and a challenge, as well as an opportunity for people who know how to navigate that. Yeah.
And
there is also.
And in this,
I had a moment. Go ahead.
No, in this challenges that you've seen all over the years, and also related to a more national approach, a more geographical restrictions on the sense of the jurisdiction itself. How do you saw the scaling up of also the solutions, either in the private or the public sector?
Yeah. Yeah, you see that there are some players who can be successful if they choose a concrete, simple niche where the law is not so developed yet, or it's still in development. So, for example, trademark law or patent law is more international and uniform, and there's not so much happening there yet. There are certain new fields with cybersecurity, or where the regulations are not so fixed or stable yet. Some other areas is, yeah, if you choose one topic, you're going to help people with their will, or making their will, or with set up a business, then you can make a difference within a nation state and choose that market and try to offer that product very well in one country. And if you choose a big market, it can still be quite a lot of customers. And typically then entrepreneurs move towards these issues that are often recurring, like setting up a business or writing a will, or that's not the best example, but so they move in that direction. But there are people who try to find the balance between understanding the real value of a certain ecosystem. If Portugal is great at maritime law, for example, there is good maritime law lawyers there. And you connect that with other places around the world where there's good maritime lawyers and around maritime trade, and you develop one product, then you can kind of create a network of specialists that is also a niche, but at the same time international, and do interesting things that way. Or we have entrepreneurs like Legal Nodes that are in an ecosystem where you have a lot of IT skills and quantitative skills, or AI or whatever, and at the same time they bring strong legal knowledge from London and an international legal knowledge, and they can combine the best of both worlds, where you have an ecosystem with a lot of great skills in design or IT, and some legal expertise you might also need from either the UK or a broader region. And the good thing about there is some regional initiatives. The European Union is an example where there are some fields of regulation that are more harmonized. So you see some players in GDPR fields where they offer a product, and also legal notes is an example of that. It's more harmonized, so you can cater to more countries at the same time.
Wilfried, maybe for the ones who don't know, could you tell us a little bit more about legal notes? What they do?
So I still hope that Margarita and Legal Notes can do their own session to really talk about them. But Legal Notes is an example of a company where they wanted to build a marketplace. So in a way for IT companies and startups and lawyers that are fast growing and are often international in nature. So they often have investors from the UK or the US, a team in Poland, a team in Ukraine, and then they have clients maybe in Brazil. So they have developed products on their platform, Legal Notes, where you can get advice on privacy and GDPR, or get advice on investment and setting up a business or cryptocurrencies, but from a network around the world of specialized lawyers in these fields. So it's a marketplace of lawyers for a very specific target audience, the fast-growing companies that are international in nature. So they have many specific types of problems for which you cannot hire a full-time lawyer, but you need a network of specialists around the world. You need to know, one day you need to know who the cryptocurrency specialist is in Malta, and the other day you need to know your GDPR compliance in Estonia. And so they weave this network of experts, and they create a marketplace in that way.
And for sure we will have the opportunity to hear firsthand what they do, and hope soon. That's the hope I leave. Also, Wilfried, working in internationally, you also saw very much the difference between regions, as you say, and since ELTA focus, of course, in Europe. What is your view in the interaction between the European legal tech market that can, of course, it has also the part of innovation itself, and the rest of the world, we would say? What was your impressions? What is your vision on this part?
Yeah, I think there are some places where there is more established players, and so they carry a lot of weight, and often they talk about innovation, but it's more superficial forms of innovation, let's say. And the places that, so I think there's a distinction between Western Europe and Eastern Europe, for example. In Eastern Europe, there is more a sentiment of a little bit less weight of the past, let's say, and more the sentiment, let's create our legal infrastructure from anew, and let's link it immediately with IT. The same what you also had in Estonia. They could kind of almost start from scratch and then set up good systems and make it. So that's an interesting difference in Europe. There's a lot going on also in Spain and in the south, but I'm a little bit less familiar with that. If I look at the differences between European ecosystems as far as I know them, and places like Kenya, or I've done a lot of work in Ukraine also, but Kenya, Nigeria, South Africa, there are some places around the world where innovation is a strategic priority out of a kind of existential necessity. In UAE, the leadership is determined, we will be the innovation frontrunner. You have that also in Singapore or in Estonia a bit, and they really take it seriously. It's not an extra. It's not a plus. It's a core of their national strategies. And there you see a lot of players, public institutions, but also law firms and also bigger players really taking an active role. in some other areas where there is less the sense that innovation is existential, you need to change to compete tomorrow. Yeah, it's a bit more seen as a luxury, a nice to have, an interesting hobby, and or sometimes just fake, like talking about innovation because the shareholders like it, but you innovate for your departments and not for the end customer. You see that in some law firms or some banks. Yeah, that's the difference. It's also understandable because when it's not existential or not necessary or not felt that way, maybe you take it a little bit easier and you refine what you have. So it's not but there are some places politically and yeah, in some ways, the places that are close to conflict, they often innovate a lot, whether it's Israel or Ukraine, or because they feel it's absolutely vital. It's not it's not a nice to have. And that change in mindsets, I think you see it now gradually, maybe in the banks in Europe, a bit of a realization, but it's also slow. And in law firms, that can still take a little bit of time before they realize that this is the law of the 21st century, like the legal tech.
And in the, well, you were managing and leading a hub. Could you tell us a little bit more about that experience, about the people that you met, like, and the steps? We had a question on if you would be a law student now, how would you also set your entrepreneurship path? And I think that's what a lot of people are curious, not only students, I would say, but also even lawyers and smaller law firms, for example, that don't have the same capacity of the bigger ones. How can they start this more innovative and technological path?
Yeah, I think it can be a bit depressing because a lot of people did law because they don't like mathematics or technology, and then some people are telling them you have to do technology or you have to be an engineer, and that's not necessarily the case. I think if you the law itself is a form of code. So if you are a legal specialist, you know how to code. You know one form of code, and it's important that people realize that you have software developers, they know how to code, but you also know a certain code that's relevant. And so that gives a little bit of peace of mind to some people. I would say pick one technology or one machine you can maybe befriend, whether it's chatbots and playing around with that a little bit so you can make your expertise a bit more available, or whether it's just becoming more efficient at creating YouTube movies with your advice and building media advice. Or there is many different ways for people to think about how can I bring my legal expertise to more people using a tool or a technology. That's one question. The second question is, can I earn a living with it? And that can be a complex question because a lot of content has become freely available or commoditized online. And so it's a little bit like what you had in the music industry there, with a lot of music becoming available online, and with the legal field starting to happen a little bit the same, that people start to Google legal responses and they get more and more. So you can look a little bit at how the music industry has dealt with that, what they're doing. They are gradually finding a way forward. It's about creating a personal community or a niche product, or building an alliance around something and claiming a stake, building an alliance of a specific type of law. But it is challenging because it is a volatile period with both technological changes as well as geopolitical changes. And so you have to, my business now is called Foresight-Transitions, because it's not only the technology changes you have to consider, there's also big trends like climate change, or big trends like geopolitical movements and inequality and discrimination and everything that it has meant. And so you have to navigate in a way forward and try to make a living for yourself and your family, or your law firm and your partners. And law firms have done fairly well recently. They can handle complexity. Lawyers are able to handle complexity. And they often have good political connections. They know how to do that too. They have a sense of politics and where regulation is going to. So that's also an advantage they can have sometimes.
Do you think that can also be the key factor regarding how the legal tech sector will then develop, since legal tech is a tool, namely also to serve lawyers, but legal structures. Will this now, will humans in the loop will be again, or once again, the ones that will shift and steer this change? Do you think it's going to impact a lot the existing tools?
I think the challenge is a little bit that for a body like ELTA, European Legal Tech Association, that in some ways Europe has fallen a little bit in between US and Chinese technological developments. And so some of the very big players in tech are not European. And whereas in some places like Africa or Latin America, it's more like, okay, they can develop from scratch. They are very creative, very resilient. So it's a different environment, and they're moving forward fast and very impressive. But Europe has had this a little bit of a feeling of, okay, we're one of the hotshots, but ultimately the technological space where Europe can compete is becoming smaller. And that has a link with then legal tech in Europe. I think maybe Europe in the coming years will find a few areas, whether a specific form of AI or a specific type of quantum technology, or where it will remain excellent and build. There's also people talking about this sovereign identity and more privacy specialization, human rights related, so different. This European model, but sometimes I still have to see it, whether it will be true. In the recent evolutions, maybe there will be some more ambition to make that true. And then, so that's the technical component. The question is, will we have European technology that you can build on? The other question is, is there a European philosophy of law that is very valuable around the world, that is actually in demand, not only in Europe, but around the world, because it's better than other models out there. And that is not necessarily technology driven. That can be style of providing a service. It can be a level of empathy. It can, whatever it may be, or attention for certain legal topics where there's less attention in other places. But also that is to be seen. And I hope that Europe and some people, legal tech specialists in Europe, also know how to form good partnerships with legal tech around the world that is good complementary, nice, that is so they can build something that's globally competitive. Yeah.
That's also in Europe. We'll see a prevalence, of course, of UK firms and seeing also the leadership, maybe also because the common law is more flexible and maybe adapting and more used maybe in international platforms. But how do you see then the possibilities for the civil law countries, since as you say, the market, it also plays a role in what can or not succeed, and the jurisdictions in Europe are quite small in a sense.
Yeah, that's it. I think some of the distinctions of the past, like civil law and common law, are maybe becoming a little less relevant, because also there's more legislation in the UK. So they're coming closer together. I think a big barrier is simply language. So a lot of lawyers and law is often linked with language. And that is both potentially a barrier and an opportunity, because it also keeps your market a little bit away from competitors. And so if you are in Europe and you are a Spanish-speaking lawyer, there is a whole you're better placed to work with Latin Americans than Americans or Chinese. So there are some advantages, and there are links with Latin America or Africa or Asia that you can benefit from with the language and cultural understanding. It's also delicate with their history, but that's one thing. And there are specific specializations that maybe European member states or countries will choose that can be interesting. Like Estonia is taking a certain stance and niche on like this digital citizenship, and they are fairly progressive. And then if you are one of the more progressive states, you can attract a lot of digital citizens from around the world to join you. And I think hopefully some other European countries or European legal tech will be as bold. And
so some boldness is in demand for Europeans.
There's also if Europe or Europeans choose to let's say retire slowly and just live a good life with some holidays and time for their family, and that is also a choice you can take in life. But some of the evolutions go pretty fast around, and I think most people still, there's this cliche that the short-term consequences are sometimes overestimated, but the longer-term ones underestimated. And it is possible that in 5 or 10 years, the Google legal advice tool will become pretty good, for example. Yeah, and then the question is, how do you relate?
A big challenge for sure.
So maybe I'm too meta, and I don't want to sound negative. So I just hope I think it is the tremendous chances and opportunity is that there is a space within Europe where there's quite some freedom of engaging with others, of forming partnerships, forming alliances. There is talk of sovereignty now, and I think that has some good elements, but I still hope that we remain connected to other places where there's a lot of experience and knowledge. And a lot of the big law firms will be too slow to handle all these changes, and some of the smaller players can be quicker and can be more agile. So that is there's definitely a lot of opportunities.
Okay, so let's take in a way or to take home some very practical tips for this. The ones already started their journey, the young entrepreneurs. We have several, and as you say, some also took, for example, study law, but then they did not really practice. They already were more keen, for example, on technology, the hybrids. We talk more and more about the hybrids. But some just partner with different mindsets. So lawyers that do not have technical capacities are working with technology, 100% technology people, and creating really good solutions. So some already started, but are really in the beginning. Some are trying to grow, and especially for those in consideration of the topic that we chose today, what can we leave as you would say, the 5 or the 10, or how many topics you want to leave in a sense of practical tips from the person that was together with so many of the entrepreneurs that are already quite in the markets, and they managed to pass the challenges, the first challenges, and assume a position now of growth.
Yeah. Each case is individual, like an individual case. So that's the tricky thing. I advise some entrepreneurs, and they have different challenges, but in general, I think if you start from a law firm, make sure you have an arrangement with the law firm or the partners about what will happen if it becomes successful, and that because sometimes then there's a conflict with leaving the law firm, and sometimes, and even if you do well, then it's a difficult moment when you leave the law firm and you take your legal tech out of it. So try to be upfront. Also, if you're a lawyer and you have no idea about software development, but you outsource it to a company, have conversations early on about co-foundership, about giving them shares, dare to share. Lawyers are a bit suspicious somehow in nature. They have learned to draft large contracts and learned not to trust anyone too much. But if your innovation is very dependent on tech, you need a tech co-founder. It's very risky to just pay an IT company to do something, because at a certain moment they will be less motivated than you, or ask more and more money, and then you have a problem too. So talk about co-foundership early with the team. Make sure you have good complementary people in the team. Don't make sure you figure out what the problem is that you're solving and what the solution is before you make your team too big. Lawyers are people, they like to work with other people, but sometimes they make a big team before they have a good problem solution fit, or they're not quite sure yet what the market is, and then they're just trying to build something that fits the team, not the market. And that's a problem often. So often lawyers love to start shaping agreements or MOUs, or so they're quite good at building the alliance and the teams, but then they forget that the market needs to have a need.
You made me smile, because I just remember that a very good and dear colleague of mine from Brazil shared the video that was quite a hype for a while, that you had two fighters, and one was like playing really, like I'm the best one in the ring. And then the other one is very quiet, not saying anything, and let him be playing this cocky movements. And, and then they put subtitles, what you think that you're going to be in the market. And then the other guy gives him a punch and knocks him out completely. And then they're like, this is the reply of the market. Sometimes you think, and you were saying exactly that. So you think you have an amazing solution that kind of fits the team, but then the market knocks you down with no mercy. And that's kind of, well, in the video was funny. In reality, it's sad, because of course people then invested too much of their time and
that's why be very quick to bring a proof of concept to the market or the clients. Test things out. Don't ask them, is this a good idea? They will maybe say no. Just test. Do they buy it? Do they purchase? Do they click? Whatever. But do this very quickly. Lawyers have a tendency to try to foresee all the risks and take a lot of time strategizing, but then you can't predict the reality unless you test it. So test it very quickly. I think these are already pretty important ones. If you
one topic that we didn't mention, and I think it's very important, and we had some prior webinars on this topic, but I'm very curious about your feedback. It's about funding. So we were told that there's quite some large amounts of funding available but how do you interact? Because for specialists in funding, this sounds so easy, but also in my experience, what I see from startups is that if some don't study laws, also others don't study finances and the economy. And it can be quite challenging, even not only access to funding, but how to deal with these matters. What would be your tips for this particular point as well, from your experience in the field?
Yeah, has been quite some funding available for innovation and technology. Legal tech is a little bit special. I mean, there's people giving an overview of the financing has been rising there in that field, but it's still less than some other fields because it is national. It's a more challenging market. So a lot of investors are a little bit careful about it. There are some places where they're less careful. If you go to UK and you do something about fintech and law, or related to, so if you go to the place where there's an ecosystem and they're familiar with it, investors will be more open to it, because many investors, what can help is to check like other legal tech and check who invested in them. Often they will not invest in a direct competitor, but they might invest in something that's adjacent to it or complementary. So that's interesting to approach these people. And there is a lot of public financing, for example, in Europe, available for innovation, and with the European accelerator program. And there, the challenge is often that you have to make a link with deep tech, or there is this and I'm going to call it hype or reality, whatever it is. There's a lot of money available if you have some AI in your product, or some quantum technology, or some a link with biology, or what. And there is a link with deep technology research. And there's even some extra money for example, female entrepreneurs. There is some extra support from European Union, but you have to. Yeah, then I think it's useful if you make some connections between your product and your service and the problem you resolve, and a deep technology in the way that, for example, the European Union describes that, or some national players. The other funding streams are often a bit more smaller, like seed funding for social impact, or and that's sometimes more local in nature, or then you have to look at foundations that are interested. If you're focused on social impact, yeah, you have to look at, you have to really be able to make your case in impact. And there's effective altruism movements, and a lot of philanthropic organizations like Ford Foundation, or in Europe, the Loudest Foundation is there's some organizations focused on justice related things. Just one more thing I want to say about this fear of the complex finances, let's say. I would say that if you can show traction to investors, that your users really grow, or your revenue really grows, then that's much more important than your Excel file model with your projections. So it's much more important to show that you are solving a need in the market, and that you know how to market your product, than this complex, financial things. I think for that, it is helpful to reach out to someone. The accelerator programs that exist, for example, Legal Notes was part of Techstars in London. You have many accelerator programs around Europe. They can provide some guidance on your financial plan, and sometimes they can give some feedback. But what's most valuable, I think, is if you talk to legal tech entrepreneurs who are 1 or 2 stages further than you, and sometimes they want to share, or other entrepreneurs who are already at Series A or Series B, or who went through a seed funding round, and maybe they're willing to share some mentorship for what did their Excel file look like, and how did they convince an investor. But it's less important than just good traction.
Well, I see a big handful of very important tips, and also what I've been questioned over and over again is that this kind of small directions, it's also important because you have a very high level of expertise, and then there's a huge gap then towards the normal lawyers or students of law, and we need to communicate also in a way that everybody understands and everybody can interact if we want to promote this entrepreneurial mindsets, right?
Yeah.
And do you have any experience related to, or any good examples to share related to, for example, to what universities are doing to promote this more entrepreneurial capacity besides the traditional law programs?
Yeah. In the Netherlands, it's quite active. The movement of like you have Yes Delft, which in Delft the technology university that creates incubators and accelerators. So I think in Northern Europe it's quite present. I'm a little bit less aware of what's happening in France, Spain, or Italy in Europe. But I think universities are becoming aware that setting up an incubator and accelerator can be useful. Often they are a little bit, sometimes they have a system that they take 20% of equity in what comes out of their incubator, but that in itself is already a barrier for the next stages sometimes, because investors don't like to see that a university has most of the equity and the founder not most of the equity, because he wants to see very motivated founders, and he wants to see a fair balance. And I think so. There are, I mean, in Amsterdam also set up a Amsterdam Law Hub. Nathalie Dijkman is leading that, and there's some good people working on that. Yeah, they shape justice, legal, tech innovations, and partnerships, and they're building an interesting ecosystem. And it's interesting if there's a physical space where people can meet, if there's some funding, if there is both public support and private partners and private support. But you need to bring all these things together. And yeah, that's also a skill to, I think part of what my organization does is also help organizations with setting up an innovation ecosystem or building incubators or accelerators. And so if there is a law firm in this call or a public entity that is looking for some of that expertise, then they can also reach out.
I was going exactly to tell you that in order to start wrapping up our today webinar. Yeah. Where can people find you, Wilfried? How can they connect?
Yeah.
Tell us.
I think when you publish this, maybe we can put my, I'll add some links, but yeah. If people Google Wilfried de Wever, but they might not understand this. And
well, in our YouTube channel, for sure, the description will be in the text.
Yeah, so you can find me at foresight-transitions.com, foresight-transitions.com. humanitysolutions.net is also one of my initiatives, and there you can find more information, or you can find me on LinkedIn or Wilfried de Wever. Yeah.
And thank you so much, Wilfried. Today, as I mentioned in our prior webinars, these are what we hope to be the first conversations that also will open the door for more courses and masterclasses in ELTA. It's our goal to stimulate as well through knowledge the legal tech market and entrepreneurs. So we hope to have you once again, and for sure, very special and final words that we will have Margarita with us very, very soon, and that she stays safe in Kiev, and that she knows that we are all supporting her and her team. And yes, so with that in mind, thank you so much, Wilfried, for your time. Hope to see you very soon in this exciting but challenging landscape of legal tech entrepreneurs and startups.
Yeah, Thank you. Have a great day, Marisa.
You too. Bye-bye.
Bye.